Good morning, everyone. I'm Asha Nayaswami. We're continuing our fireside chats, sheltering in place with God. So let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to lift our hearts in pure devotion, opening ourselves to your guidance and to your love. Free us from all limiting self-definitions, that we may live in this world according to your will, instruments of your love in everything we do. Om. Peace. Amen. I woke up this morning without any idea what to talk about. Usually it just comes to me, but this morning it's just nothing. There's a certain quietude about our community this morning, which is, it's always quiet these days, but somehow it seems quieter and there's more stillness, and so less thoughts are running through. So I had thought about just reminiscing about early years at Ananda, but the way I've sort of now calling this, I'm calling it thinking about Ananda. Because Ananda itself is a big part of the reality of my life. Let me pull this. Let me pull the thoughts here. I remember when Swami came, and it might have been his 75th, could have been his 80th birthday, but I remember him sitting down to give a class or whatever it was going to be, and he sort of said, "I'm an old man, I get to sit and reminisce." That's what he said. And then he just, talked about the experience of what it had been like. Here's what I was thinking. I was thinking exactly of the 1970s and the experience of what that was like for Swamiji. I think it was on his 80th birthday. We had a very large event at Ananda Village, where Swami lived when he was in America, and there was a huge, hundreds of people there. It was quite something, and he repeated to us something he'd often repeated to us, that when Master was living, Master had said to Swamiji, "You have a great work to do." And except for the first time that he said it, when one or two other people may have been able to overhear it, Swamiji said Master only ever said that to him in private. And for Swamiji, it wasn't a compliment. It wasn't saying you're a fabulous disciple and you have a great work to do. It wasn't something meant to make him feel at all self-important. It was a commission, meaning you have a great work to do. Because he said Master also used it in the context of, you have a great work to do, therefore, you need to be this kind of person or that kind of person. You need to master your moods, whatever it might be, because you have a great work to do. And after Master died, Swami told us that Rajasi, who was Master's spiritual successor, came to Swamiji and said, "You have a great work to do." And Rajasi had never been present when Master said that to Swamiji, so it was very touching. He felt like it was Master's voice speaking. But then Rajasi added, "And Master will give you the strength to do it." Sometimes Swami said Master will give you the strength to do it. Sometimes he said Master will give you the power to do it. So I don't know whether Rajasi said it different ways or Swami just interpreted that in different ways. So on this occasion of his 80th birthday, Swami looked out at all these Could you get me a Kleenex? I need one now. Swamiji looked, sorry, the best laid plans. The voice betrays you, and then all of a sudden you can't do it. Thank you very much. I just need one. Thank you. There. Swami looked out at this group of people, and part of what prompted this is I myself feeling somewhat sentimental about the whole thing. I think, I don't know if it was in private or standing up publicly myself, but I had looked at many of my friends, and many of us came when we were in our early 20s. Many of us are within 1 year of age of each other, so 23, 24, 25. And there we were, what were we now, 65, 66. And it's considerably older. My hair has never turned white, but many of my friends, their dark hair is white. Many of the men who came with long hippie locks don't have much hair at all anymore. It's just like, I looked at them and I saw that they'd aged. And of course, I knew that I must have aged too. And it wasn't quite like that wonderful story of the disciple who comes to the guru, and the guru says, carry water and chop wood. And he becomes an old man and never does anything but carry water and chop wood, just one-pointedly doing what his guru said. It wasn't as simple as that, but it was almost as simple as that. We came young, we became old, and we never left. And that, to me, in many ways, is success on the spiritual path. It isn't really the phenomenal experiences you have. It's just the determination to persevere. So I believe Durga stood up and she mentioned that. She mentioned how we came young and stayed. And Durga said to Swami, because of you, because of what you created, what you did gave us our lives. And it was a beautiful way to put it, because it was the truth. His spiritual magnetism, his power, and his absolutely unrelenting determination to fulfill the commission that had been given to him by his guru, which included building these communities and building this expression of master, to carry it on as Swamiji understood it was meant to be carried on. So then Swami's saying, speaking of how Rajasi promised that Master would give him the strength and the power to do it. And he looked at all our faces and he said, this is the strength that Rajasi was referring to. He said, it's you. It's your energy added to this that's really made it what it is. There wasn't a dry eye in the room, is about the only way to put it, including Swami's. Now, so what I was thinking about was, when I came to Ananda, there was no such thing. I arrived in 1971. Much of the community was still centered up at this, what is the seclusion retreat, which is this still very isolated 72 acres, which is 3 miles back on a very rutted dirt road across a pure moonscape landscape. It was land that was hydraulically mined over a century ago, but was just ruined by the mining. So it's still sort of barren, with only these few powerful trees that have managed to hold on against all the gravel and everything that's there. You go way back nowhere and climb up this other little dirt road, and finally you find a little sign. It's a bigger sign now that says Ananda. And then there's 72 acres up there. When I was there starting in 71, well, actually it's still true. It's just that property is prevented from developing. It's completely off the grid. There's no electricity. Now with cell phones, there might be cell phones, but there was no telephone. There was no way to communicate. We had running water in a few places, but mostly we lived in trailers or teepees or little cabins that were just hammered together. And you had no amenities at all inside. If you had an outhouse, nearby, that was great. And there would be a standpipe here and there, else you'd have to go up to the main water tower and just literally, you just carry your water in gallon buckets, gallon jars, just going up, filling 2-gallon bottles and carrying them out to your campsite or where you happen to live. That was the way it was. Swami was in his early 40s. He was absolutely at the height of his vitality. Just he was so strong, he was so energetic, he was so dynamic, he was so focused and determined. And he had an idea of what Ananda would become, but none of the rest of us did, not at all. I was just living this idyllic life, absolutely idyllic, out in this rural area, owning very little, living formally as a renunciate. And I remember thinking, I had a harmonium, which probably cost something, $100 or something. I don't know where I got the $100. I had this bangle, the same bangle, this gold silver bangle, which cost $150 then, which was a gift, because who had $150 to spend on something you couldn't eat or wouldn't heat your trailer? I had a mala that had been a gift to me from a friend who went to India. Oh yes, I had a pair of insulated bean boots from LL Bean that were really valuable. And somehow I think I'd managed to acquire a complete rain suit because we had no vehicles. So to get anywhere, and it rained and snowed a lot. So to get around, you had to have those things. And I looked forward to having less. I wasn't really quite sure how I could have less, but I looked forward to having less. I never, in my wildest dreams, imagined I would live 30 years in Palo Alto. It just wasn't part of the picture. I just left the world behind and loved the idea of never seeing it again. But the commitment was not to that. The commitment was as a disciple. And I remember a turning point in that life of discipleship. I'm talking about I lived at the seclusion retreat. Then there was what is called the community now, the village area. We called it the farm at that point because we had bought this farm. We had the meditation retreat, then we bought the farm. Bought the farm for fighter pilots means you crash and die, but that's not what we meant. But it was where householders and people with families lived. And Jyotish lived there because he was in charge of developing that. So he lived in that area, and it became the village. Everything worked. Swamiji lived at Ayodhya, which was yet a third piece where Crystal Hermitage is. Eventually, I moved over there. And I remember driving with Swami through the village area and looking out the window, looking at the barn that had been built and this little house over here. And by then the publications building was in place. Publications building is now Hansa Temple. And you have to understand, each one of these things had just been dragged up from the mud. It's just, we'd just done it, board by board, dollar by dollar. It was just this huge effort. Everything was a huge effort. And I was in the car with Swami. I believe he was driving. I think I was in the back seat. And I was looking out the window. And I was conscious of, how everything had been created. I was a few years late coming to Ananda. It started in 1968. But I was part of a lot of what I was looking out the window seeing. And I was extremely conscious because I was working for Swami at that time as his secretary. I was extremely conscious of how every minute of his consciousness was devoted to being a disciple and to doing what his guru had asked of him. And he felt Ananda was what his guru had asked of him, and he would die trying. I mean, he would spend every bit of energy he had to fulfill his discipleship to his guru. Now, I was a disciple. I had become a disciple of Master through Swamiji. Swamiji was my link to everything. So it was through Swami that I understood things. And I served Swamiji and felt like I was serving Master and serving Swami. I wrote letters for him. I often cooked for him. I sometimes sewed clothes for him, or that sort of thing. And I did a lot of other things also. I wasn't just a domestic. I was involved in vast ways with everything that was going on. But I didn't really care about it. It's the only way I can think of putting it. To my mind, being a disciple meant that I was there for God realization. For me, I was there to learn from Swami. That was the way I felt it. And everything else was just going on around me. Then it crossed my mind that Swamiji was not indifferent to what we were doing. He may have been detached in the spiritual sense that Swami was not building Ananda. Swami was doing what his guru had asked him to do. So he had a profound commitment to doing what his guru had asked him to do. And he understood that to be that he needed to establish this new way of living, these communities that Master had said were going to be the lifestyle of the future, that I'm sowing my words in the ether and they shall move the West, Master said. Thousands of youths must go north, south, east, and west, covering the world with little colonies, showing that playing, living, and high thinking lead to the greatest happiness. This was a huge thought that Master had put out that Swami received as his personal instruction. And it was not easy to do because of all of us, in addition to just everything else that the planet throws in front of you of wind, water, air, and money problems, that just are always there, and fire eventually too. But there was just all of us, because the thing about a community is you can't do it alone. By definition, there had to be others, and we were we were just like handfuls of mercury, just going in all directions, and he would just steadily just keep vibrating correctly, and just hope that enough of us would get the wave and get in line behind him. So I was way in line behind Swami. I was totally behind Swami, but I didn't care. And then I looked out the window and I knew how much effort was taken, and I looked at Swami, and I knew that he was sacrificing everything to make it work. And it occurred to me that there was something really wrong with my attitude. Here was my model of discipleship, and he was committed. And here was I trying to follow in his footsteps, and I thought I was being spiritual. See, this is what I have to put into this. I thought I was being spiritual by not committing myself. What did I care about things of this world, is how I thought about it. I'm a renunciate after all. I'm just here to learn from Swami. What do I care? But the fact that he cared got my attention. And it was interesting because my first way of committing myself, and this was just the way it worked for me, was that I knew that Swami was committed to me. I knew he was committed to me as a friend. And I had seen already, it was just a few years in, I'd seen countless examples of the purity and the power of his commitment to my spiritual well-being. And friendship is really the correct word for it, because he was very simply a true friend. True in the sense that he was committed to my well-being, not merely to my whims, but to my well-being, with a loyalty that I never have experienced before or since. But I wasn't committed to him in the same way. I was there for what I could get. Oh, I was giving, but I was giving to him personally, but I wasn't being a friend, because a friend embraces what is important to the friend. So I realized if I was going to be the kind of friend to Swamiji that he was to me, I needed to help him. Just as simple as that, I needed to help him. And later on, when I began to learn more about saints and about true spiritual attitudes, I realized helping God is actually a very elevated way to think about it. Somebody recently sent me something I'd never seen before. which was a prayer that Saint Teresa of Avila had for all her nuns, or not the admonition we know of, let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you, all things will pass, but God changes not. We think of that as Saint Teresa of Avila's admonition. But this was instructions to her nuns. And it was very simple. Jesus does not have hands in this world. Jesus does not have feet in this world. Jesus does not have a face or a voice in this world. We must be his hands, feet, his face, and his voice. That's why we're here. We're here to be him because he's not here himself. Now, of course, in his spirit he is, but he doesn't have hands, feet, and a voice. But we do. My friend Shivani, she used to put it in a humorous way whenever she'd give a talk, which she gave many. She's one of Ananda's prominent teachers, has been for decades. She would always pray, Lord, I have no brain and you have no voice. So let's work together and make this beneficial to the people who come. So we have to be like that. And I realized that's what Swami was doing. Master had left in 1952. This was 20 some years later. Master was not there to carry it forward. So if not Swamiji, who was going to do it? And why not Swamiji? And then after him, I thought, why not me? Why not? What a privilege. What a marvelous opportunity to have work that actually matters. And I began to shift my thinking from that point. It took me time because I was kind of a snob. It's the only way I can think to put it. Just kind of a Vedanta snob, just trying not to be attached to this world. But I wasn't unattached. I was uncommitted. In other of these conversations, I've talked about that, so I won't go into it so much. But I saw that Swami was committed to serving his guru, and it behooved me to become equally committed. And that was the strength. And that was what Durga was saying to Swamiji. He showed us how powerful life could be if we gave ourselves to it completely and didn't hold back and committed ourselves to high ideals. And Ananda itself, it sort of, I have mixed feelings about the development of Ananda. My friend Shivani also, back when she was a pioneer at that point, she said, the pioneer life suits her. She said, I hope before they build sidewalks here in this community, she said, meaning before we develop to the point where we have the leisure to put in a sidewalk, she said, I hope I'll be off somewhere plowing up the desert. And after 10 years at Ananda Village, she went to live in Assisi, Italy, and was able to start plowing up the desert again. She got her wish. She got to do it at least twice. But Ananda had so little physical form at that time that it was easy for us to remember that it was really the consciousness of the people. It was also easy for us to remember that Ananda was us, because you can have all the beautiful buildings in the world, you can have all the organization, you can have all the money, but if you don't have the Spirit of God, you don't really have anything. So when you don't have anything, all you have is the Spirit of God. So it's easier to remember. From those early renunciate days, I learned not having any money, if you're not actually hungry and homeless. I wasn't hungry, I wasn't homeless, I wasn't cold, I wasn't wet in the winter. Those are kind of like my bottom lines. I wasn't really home. I had my bean boots and I had my rain suit. I had my little panel ray heater and my little propane heater. I was able to buy propane and food easily. My trailer didn't leak. Below that, I think it would be a great challenge for me. God may put me below that, but we'll see. But I didn't have any money, really. I didn't have any discretionary income. That's the word for it. So if you have no money, you really don't bother to want anything, because what is the point? What's really difficult is to have a little money. because then you have to decide all the time. And the possibility of desires are there. So where I was going with that was when Ananda, really, we had so little physically beyond the bare necessities. It was our consciousness, it was the spirit, it was the joy of doing it. It was the extraordinary friendships we had with each other. And just the side by side with these angelic souls, many of whom we've all aged together, and have now become, now that the coronavirus is here, I understand that I'm an old woman. You become part of the vulnerable population instead of the one who picks up the biggest load and carries it up the hill, which is who I had been accustomed to being, and actually probably still am. But chronologically, they won't let me. No, I have to admit it. I'm not as strong as I used to be in my body, my spirit more than ever. But the end point of that is, now that we have buildings, and now that we have multiple generations, and now you can have a nicer house, and you can have a less nice house than someone else, or a better car, or not such a better car. You have choices where you live, and all of these different things. We're still, poor as church mouse. Mice is really, as we joke about it, we just go bankrupt with more zeros after it. But it's easy to mistake the form and think that the form is really it. Now, don't misunderstand me. Swami devoted himself to building these communities. And I know from my living experience, you have to have enough form to be able to have a place for the spirit to express itself. You need to live together, and you need not to be hungry, and you need not to be cold. And when you're in an urban environment, you need something that people can see. Swami himself made us make Ananda nicer than we would have made it ourselves. In 1976, when he went into seclusion in India and had a month there with suffering Moses in Srinagar, Kashmir, Swami bought thousands of dollars worth of carved walnut furniture with embroidered fabrics to go with it. I was still living in a trailer with no running water. And I helped raise money to buy carved walnut furniture and embroidered fabrics. We had no place to put this stuff. It was all shipped back. And Swami had to explain to us. He said, in America especially, he said, if you're, as he put it, where money is easy to come by and material success is so important. He said, if you're too poor, people think there's something wrong with your ideas. He said, and for everyone, you need to create an environment not of luxury, but of refinement, of a refinement that matches your ideals, that is as refined as your ideals, because then it opens the door for people to understand what you have to give. And so it wasn't out of desire. He had to coax us out of those little trailers. Because he said, if we just live like this, no one will ever understand what we're doing. And no one will be attracted to what we're doing. Because it wasn't for ourselves. Everything about it was not what we wanted, but what would serve Master's work. So I moved to Palo Alto more than 30 years ago. We've developed a beautiful community. We have a beautiful temple. Not luxurious, but refined. Because that's what's required. More than that is not needed. But that much is needed because this is a material universe. And without sufficient form to give it focus, Master himself, you see, bought Mount Washington, bought Lake Shrine, built little churches because the human mind needs a place to see it. But what then makes it real is the Spirit of God within it. And the Spirit of God is not created by the paint on the walls. The Spirit of God is created by the souls who come in and love God. And so here we are, sort of at this stage of service to Master, a time when my group hasn't really, left the planet. We all incarnated, many of us incarnated very close to each other. I often wonder if we'll all leave at the same time. During the early years, we had birthdays by astrological signs. I wonder if we'll have funerals by astrological signs. There'll just be too many to do them individually. We'll see. And the next generations of disciples are beginning to define Ananda. And so I think about it. I think about it. Who will we be? What will it unfold to? It's actually very, very simple. Ananda is the opportunity to love God and the opportunity to love God together. And the more we do it, the more God will be pleased and will bless us with his joy. God bless you all.